The migrant crisis continues to overwhelm cities across the country as asylum seekers travel thousands of miles from the southern border to places like Chicago, Denver, and New York City. Speaking on CNN, New York City Mayor Eric Adams spoke about the influx of migrants inundating the city, some 200 of whom ended up on the sidewalks outside of the Roosevelt Hotel near Grand Central Station. Let's listen.
I'm the mayor of the city of New York. I take responsibilities for anything that happens in this city. It is my obligation to make sure that New Yorkers are safe. We received an overwhelming number of individuals. We already reached the maximum of how many people we could house. And for that period of time, we could not place people in the Roosevelt Hotel because we still have to abide by the restrictions for occupancy, for safety, and we were able to find them temporary shelter in another location. But we cannot state that this won't happen again. We received
You can't say that it won't happen
No,
again?
we cannot. We received over 90,000 people in our city, and I've been stating for some time that we need relief, we need help. This is a national crisis, and it should be handled by national resources.
New York City has received the most monetary help from the federal government to address the crisis, $140 million to be exact. But Adams wants more, announcing Wednesday he's seeking $12 billion over the next 3 years to cover the growing cost of the humanitarian issue.
We already spent over $1 billion already. And to state that $100 million could address a national $12 billion problem, we're saying we need more, and then we need others. We need a real decompression strategy at the border. We need to allow these migrants, asylum seekers to do that I believe is the most American thing to do, and that is to work.
Adams said he has not talked with President Biden this year, and he also acknowledged money alone won't solve the migrant crisis. Policies need to be implemented too. In a statement to Rising, spokesperson for the White House said, quote, "Senior advisor to the president, Tom Perez, was in New York yesterday to continue the close coordination with our state and city partners. He met with the city and state officials to discuss how the federal government can continue to work in partnership with the city, state, and other critical stakeholders to address the migrant situation. We are committed to working to identify ways to improve efficiencies and maximize the resources the federal government can provide. Since the administration's border enforcement and management plan went into full effect, unlawful border crossings are lower than before Title 42 was lifted. However, Congress can reform our broken immigration system and provide additional resources to the communities across the country." So that's a lot coming out of the White House, essentially calling on Congress to address the issue. But $12 billion is a lot of federal funds to ask for as the state of New York City. We've also seen incredible stunts by the state of Texas, Governor Abbott, and Florida, DeSantis, shipping migrants around the country to make a statement that they as well need more resources. But I think Adams has a point that it doesn't matter how much money you throw at the issue. You can't just throw dollars out of a helicopter. They need to be well spent on having a pipeline so that if we are taking in asylum seekers, they have a path to not just citizenship, but of integrating into our economy in a way that's sustainable. We have so many Americans that are already struggling economically, and the tensions have been pretty clearly drawn by the media, by political commentators, that the resources are limited and having additional people in the country means less resources for you. The basic economics of supply and demand tell us that that's not the case, that if more people are working, we're supplying more, we're producing more. It's not this tragedy of the commons or a scarcity created by additional people integrating our economy if we are able to actually integrate them. And we have policies in place that give people a path to integrate into our economy in a sustainable way.
I think it's funny to hear Mayor Eric Adams talk about the so-called crisis that's taking place in New York City. He's talking about 90,000 migrants who have come to New York since the start of the Biden administration, compared to millions overall who have crossed over into the country illegally. So to hear him talk about that while border towns have to deal with this issue on a daily basis over the past 10, 20 years is really patently quite ridiculous. And not to mention that he has been supportive of many of the policies that have led to the breakdown in order at the border. I mean, the Biden administration undid the Remain in Mexico policy, which would require asylum seekers to wait out out their time either in a U.S. detention facility or across the border in Mexico while their claims were adjudicated. And the reality is that the vast majority of these individuals who we're referring to as asylum seekers will not qualify for asylum. They're mostly economic migrants. That's not a qualification for being granted political asylum. It's an entirely different category of immigration. And so I just feel like there's so many misleading things being said from these Democrat Party officials about the reality of the immigration crisis that we're facing right now. And as you said, Jessica, with the way the economy is right now for everyday Americans, the idea that we can just suddenly integrate millions of people when we don't even really know who they are or where they're coming from, because again, they came across illegally and didn't filter through the system properly and didn't go through their court cases. That's just not feasible to suddenly add millions of people to the economy when we still have so many Americans who have not re-entered the workforce after COVID. So this is beyond the problem of a few hundred migrants waiting outside the Roosevelt Hotel. This is absolutely a nationwide issue, and it needs to be driven by policy changes, not money.
Yeah, I think we need to see members of Congress take into their own hands the power of the purse. It can't be federal funds appropriated directly from an administration to Mayor Adams in New York City. There needs to be a more elaborate policy plan to put real productive resources to use and say, hey, we have outsourced money creation to private banks for so long. What has this resulted in? This has resulted in everyone who is issuing debt, who is giving out loans, who is making the decision as to where new dollars enter the economy and how many are private actors who don't have long-term careers or stake invested in the communities that they make investment decisions about when it comes to their personal lives. They oftentimes don't even live in those communities, but they have to make a deliberation. What's the highest return on investment? Which is not always a return when it comes to the people who live in that community and the people who are on the receiving end of those dollars putting them to use. Oftentimes it's businesses, it's places like BlackRock that are investing in large investment properties, not really thinking about the longevity of that property, especially if they have a 10 or 15-year return. We're talking really short term as well. And that's a really tough timeline to flip a profit. So what are you going to do with that asset? You're going to manage it with as little resources invested as possible so that you can sell it with an extreme gain, because a lot of your investors in a place like BlackRock, where it's publicly traded and not private capital, you need to have returns to them and take your cut of fees out of it. So you're going to try and maximize profit as much as possible. Think about all of the people who need housing and jobs in the country. Is that a sustainable way to inject new capital into the economy? No, that creates the precise economic conditions where our everyday working people are not being paid well, and where when we have migrants who want to come and live and work in the United States because we've had a half of century or more of American intervention destabilizing the countries they're now fleeing from, where again, US-based multinational corporations exploited their land and labor where they're coming from as well. Now that kind of policy has come home to roost, and our economy is in shambles. We can't take in migrants, and giving more money to Mayor Adams isn't going to help it. We need Congress to pass policies that are similar to the New Deal, because that's how dire the economic state of our country is literally today. We'll have more rising after this.